The baby's cries faded into the night, swallowed by the howling wind. She knelt there, in the dirt outside the cabin, her hands trembling, her cheeks split open where his boot had struck. In her arms, the tiny girl whimpered, unaware of the shame the world had already hung around her neck. From the porch they watched, the men, the brothers, the old ones, faces twisted in disgust, as if the child was a curse. "Only sons carry a man's name," her husband spat, tossing a bottle into the dark, glass shattering like her future. She pressed the baby tighter to her chest, blood dripping from her forehead into the dusty earth. And just when the last sliver of hope seemed to flicker out, a shadow appeared at the edge of the tree line, tall, still, and silent. The gunslinger. No one knew his name, but when he stepped forward, every cruel voice fell silent, and for the first time in her life, someone was willing to bleed for her. Subscribe now because tomorrow's story will haunt you even deeper. You'll need it. But before that, let me take you to the day it all began. The town of Sable Creek was built on dust, drink, and the kind of silence that could rot a man from the inside out. The wind never truly rested here. It scraped against the warped wood of the saloon and peeled at the paint of the chapel like the town was always trying to shed its own skin. Some said the land was cursed, a place where things came to die slow. Lena May didn't argue. She'd lived here all her life and seen the truth of it. Each morning she rose before the sun had the courage to crest the ridge, wrapping her shawl tight around her thin shoulders before stepping out onto the brittle earth. The general store's shutters rattled when she passed, though no one ever looked up from the porch. Children were called inside with hurried hands. Women watched from windows, their faces half hidden behind curtains. It wasn't her face that scared them, not exactly. Though the scar across her right cheek didn't help. A twisted pale mark, earned one night when her late husband's temper burned hotter than his whiskey. Nor was it the limp in her left leg, a cruel reminder of being thrown from a horse in a drunken rage. And it wasn't even her hearing, half gone after the last time she had hit the floor too hard and too often. It was the way Lena May reminded them of everything they wanted to pretend didn't exist. No woman married to a man like Boone Carver ended up whole, not in body, not in spirit, and once he was gone, found rotting in a river with a bullet through his chest, no one quite knew what to do with her. Widows in Sable Creek were supposed to weep pretty and move on. Lena May hadn't wept for Boone. She hadn't moved on either. She stayed, and the town hated her for it. At the church, Pastor Harlow would glance her way with something like pity, or maybe fear, but he never called on her. At the trading post, folks spoke over her, around her, as if the air where she stood was heavy and unclean. And when she passed, people whispered, "That's her, Boone's woman." You can still see the devil in her eyes. She should have left with the body. The only companion Lena May had was the old mule, Jasper, who stood outside her crumbling house with a patience few humans possessed. And the silence. Always the silence. Inside her small cabin, the boards groaned under the weight of memory. She would sit by the cold stove, the baby swaddled against her chest, tracing the pattern of the cracked floor with her finger. The baby, her daughter, was a soft warmth in her arms, a reminder that something good could be carved out of the wreckage. But the town didn't see it that way. A girl. A girl. Not a son to carry on a name, not a strong boy to raise a homestead. Just another mouth, another burden. Boone's family had been the first to turn their backs when she birthed a daughter. Now the whole town followed their lead. Sometimes Lena May would press her ear to the baby's small chest, just to feel the rhythm of her heartbeat. Proof that at least one thing in this God-forsaken town was still alive. The whispers grew darker after the child came. Some said Lena May had cursed herself by defying Boone's will. Others muttered that the girl would be nothing but trouble, like her mother before her. She could feel the judgment like a weight against her spine when she walked the single dusty street that ran through Sable Creek. No friends, no allies, just the echo of boots on dry dirt and the knowledge that when it came down to it, if she cried out, no one would answer. She was an echo of grief in a town that had no room for it. And every day she woke up, that burden grew heavier. If this is breaking your heart already, You haven't seen the worst yet. Tap subscribe. I've got another truth waiting for you tomorrow. And still, Lena May clung to hope. Not the kind that came with prayers or promises. The quiet kind. The stubborn seed buried deep in the ribs, whispering, one day, maybe one day, something will change. She didn't know how, or when. But even in Sable Creek, where the ground cracked and the sky turned mean by noon, hope could be stubborn too, especially for a woman who had nothing left to lose. The day he rode into Sable Creek, the wind shifted. Not much else changed at first. The dust still clawed at the windows, the sun still beat down on the backs of the desperate. But Lena May felt it. A prickle at the nape of her neck, a thrum under her skin. Something was different. She was outside the trading post, the baby in a sling against her chest, bartering a handful of eggs for a sack of flour that was half weevil, when the first murmurs started. A horse's hooves clattered against the cracked stone road, slow, deliberate, not like the frantic pace of messengers or the heavy stomps of ranch hands. This was measured, unhurried, like a man who had nowhere to be, or like a man who had already been everywhere that mattered. She turned, squinting against the glare. The stranger was tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low over his brow. A duster, coat hung from his shoulders, dark with travel grime. He rode a black horse, lean and sharp, muscles rippling beneath a skin slick with dust and sweat. And though he said nothing, his presence spoke volumes. Conversation stopped as he passed. Mrs. Harrow clutched her pearl buttons tighter to her throat. Old Bill Latch cursed under his breath and spit into the dirt. Strangers in Sable Creek were rare, strangers who carried themselves like death walking on two legs. Even rarer. Lena May dipped her head low, trying to shrink into the doorframe. She didn't need more trouble. Not now. Not ever. But even so, something pulled at her. Something that hadn't stirred in her since before the bruises and the whispers and the long, silent nights. Curiosity. Hope's reckless cousin. The stranger, dismounted in front of the saloon, tying his horse loosely at the hitching post. He didn't move with the stiffness of a cowboy or the arrogance of an outlaw. There was a precision to him, a patience, like a wolf waiting out a storm. He paused, and in that pause, his eyes found hers. A heartbeat stuttered in Lena May's chest. For a moment, the whole world narrowed to the two of them, the dust, the sun, the broken town fading into a blur of nothing. His gaze wasn't cruel, like Boone's had been, nor was it pitying, like the preacher's. It was steady, heavy but not unbearable, as if he saw her, all of her, and didn't look away. He tipped his hat once, a small, almost imperceptible nod, and then he was gone, swallowed by the bat-wing doors of the saloon. Lena May stood there far longer than she should have, the baby fussing softly against her chest. What if someone saw you for who you are, not what you carry? Subscribe. One day, that story might be yours too. That night, the rumors spread faster than prairie fire. Gun for hire, some said. Bounty hunter, said others. Trouble, they all agreed. At the well, Missy Carter leaned in close to Lena May, her breath sour with gossip. Heard he killed a man in Wichita, over a card game. Lena May said nothing, just kept hauling the bucket hand over hand, muscles straining. Best keep your distance, darlin', Missy warned with a pointed look. A man like that don't bring salvation, only graves. But Lena May wasn't a fool. She had seen salvation offered once before. Slick tongues, empty promises, and it had nearly killed her. If the stranger was dangerous, he wasn't hiding it, and somehow that made him safer than most of the men in Sable Creek. The next time she saw him, it was 2 days later at the smithy. She was picking up a mended kettle, coins folded carefully, in her apron. He was sharpening the edge of a long, brutal-looking knife. Again their eyes met. Again the world shrank to just the two of them. This time, he spoke. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and rough, like it had been scraped against. Gravel and whiskey, it was nothing. It was everything. Lena May swallowed hard, nodded once, and turned away. She felt the weight of his gaze on her back all the way down the road, and she didn't know whether to run faster or stop and let it catch her. The town watched too. They didn't like it. Eyes followed her more openly now, cold, accusing, as if her shame wasn't enough already. As if daring to be seen by a man like that was another sin to hang around her neck. Danger stalked the edges of her world like a coyote in the dark. She knew it. Felt it in the way Boone's brother Amos stared too long at the baby now. Felt it in the way the town marshal started showing up wherever she went. All false smiles and sticky glances. There were worse things than being alone. She was beginning to remember that now. One evening, as the sun bled out across the plains and the air turned heavy with storm scent, Lena May sat on her porch, rocking the baby slow. She hummed a song she barely remembered, a lullaby her mother used to sing before memory blurred into bruises and silence. Bootsteps crunched against the dirt path. Slow. Deliberate. Her body tensed. Her hand tightened around the knife she kept, tucked beneath the rocker, but it was him, the stranger. He stood at the gate, one hand resting easy on the wood. The setting sun lit him from behind, making him seem more ghost than man. He didn't speak. He didn't move closer. Neither did she. Silence stretched between them, taut and humming. In that silence, Lena May heard something she hadn't heard in a long, long time. Respect, not pity, not disgust, not desire. Respect. She rose slowly, the baby cradled against her, and walked to the edge of the porch. The boards creaked underfoot, but she didn't falter. Their eyes met again. He tipped his hat once more, deeper this time, almost formal. Then he turned and walked away into the growing twilight, his coat whipping behind him like a shadow. Lena May stood there long after. He disappeared, her heart beating a rhythm she didn't quite recognize. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, not all men came to Sable Creek to take something. Maybe one had come to give something back. The storm had been building for days. Not the kind that roared from the sky. No, this storm lived in men's hearts, fueled by whiskey, pride, and the old, ugly need to crush what they didn't understand. It started simple, a missing bushel of corn, a broken fence, an excuse. Boone's brother, Amos, came calling, with a pack of them one night. 6 men, drunk and laughing, torches bobbing like devil lights through the dark. They found Lena May at the well, her baby strapped tight against her chest, fumbling with the rope, her hands numb with cold. They didn't bother with words. Amos knocked the bucket from her grasp, sending water splashing into the dirt. He yanked, the sling from her shoulder, the baby tumbling into the dust with a thin, startled cry. Lena May lunged, not thinking, not caring, scraped her knees bloody as she scooped her daughter into her arms. She barely registered the rough hands, grabbing her hair the hard boot that kicked her back down. "You think you're better than us now?" Amos sneered, his face twisted in hate. "Parading around like some high lady getting eyes from strangers?" The others laughed, a sick, mean sound. Someone grabbed the hem of her dress, yanking it high. Someone else hurled the first clump of mud. It hit her cheek, cold and wet. The second clump struck her ribs. The third burst against the back of her head. Lena May clutched the baby tight and curled over her, trying to shield her small body from the blows. They didn't care. They didn't stop. By the time they tired of the game, Lena May was covered in mud and spit, her dress torn, her lips split wide. The baby screamed, a thin, pitiful wail that echoed across the silent town. No one came. No one dared. The men sauntered, off, laughing, tossing the last shreds of her dignity to the dust. Lena May lay there shaking, tasting blood and dirt and hopelessness. The baby whimpered against her chest, too exhausted to cry properly now. She didn't remember getting up. Didn't remember stumbling through the alleys, keeping to the shadows like a wounded animal. Didn't remember reaching the edge of town, where the prairie stretched endless and black under a sky choked with stars. All she knew was that she had to run. Somewhere. Anywhere. Away from Sable Creek. Away from the memories. The ground was half frozen. The snow not yet deep enough to blanket the earth, but enough to soak her bare feet and freeze her skirt stiff. She ran anyway. Branches whipped her face. Brambles tore at her arms. The baby whimpered against her chest. At some point she fell, hard, landing in a patch of churned mud and half-melted snow. The baby slipped from her arms, rolling a few feet, her cries cutting sharp through the night. Lena May tried to crawl to her, tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. She had nothing left. She lay there, the cold seeping into her bones, the baby's cries growing fainter in her ears. Maybe it would be better this way. Maybe it would end quietly. No more pain, no more shame, no more pretending. She closed her eyes. Somewhere far off, she thought she heard hooves pounding. A voice, calling. She didn't lift her head, didn't dare hope. She barely felt the arms that scooped her up, barely registered the blanket wrapped tight around her shivering form. But when the rough, calloused hand gently lifted the baby and tucked her against Lena May's chest, she forced her eyes open. It was him. The stranger. Kneeling in the snow beside her. His coat thrown around them both, his face lined with something raw and aching. Not pity, something deeper, something older. He didn't say a word, just tightened the blanket, lifted her carefully and carried her through the night, step after step after step. No fanfare, no promises, no judgment, only care, only truth. He brought her to a small cabin, outside of town, a place she hadn't known existed, tucked in the trees like a secret. He built a fire with quick, efficient movements, found dry cloth, a battered kettle, a scrap of soap. He cleaned the mud from her hair, the blood from her face. He checked the baby's limbs, murmuring soft reassurances under his breath. Lena May watched through half-lidded eyes, too weak to speak, too numb to cry. Still, he didn't leave. When the baby whimpered for milk, he found a battered tin cup and warmed water over the fire, soaking a corner of cloth so the child could suckle. When Lena May's hands trembled too, hard to feed herself, he knelt and offered spoonfuls of broth without a word. Slowly, hour by hour, the feeling returned to her body. Pain, shame, but also something else. Life. When she could finally speak, her voice came out cracked and small. Why? He didn't pretend not to understand. He sat back on his heels, studying her with those quiet, unflinching eyes. You deserved better, he said simply. No grand speeches, no savior's boasts, just the truth. Lena May closed her eyes, her throat thick. No one had ever said that to her before. Not her father, not Boone, not the town. Better was for other people. Better was a dream you didn't dare dream. She sat up slowly, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows on the walls. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He hesitated a moment, as if weighing the cost of the answer. "Silas," he said at last. Silas. The name felt solid, trustworthy, a name you could lean on when the world fell apart. She nodded once, cradling the baby closer. For a long time they just sat there in silence, the fire warming the small, battered room. And in that silence, something shifted again. Not the storm, this time. Not the fear, something lighter. Something fragile, but real. Trust. It wouldn't come all at once. Wouldn't bloom overnight like a storybook flower. But it was there, seeded deep in the ashes. Waiting. They thought she was broken, but someone saw gold in the ashes. Subscribe and I promise you tomorrow's story will prove love still lives out here. The days that followed were stitched together from silence, small kindnesses, and the slow mending of two broken things. Lena May didn't ask Silas why he stayed. Silas didn't ask Lena May why she flinched when the wind slammed the door, or why she cried without sound when she thought he wasn't looking. They built something unspoken between them, something sturdier than words, a fire that would not die even when the nights grew black and bitter. It started with a mended fence. Silas spent the mornings repairing the sagging posts out front, hammering and sawing with quiet determination. At first, Lena May watched from the porch, the baby swaddled, tight against her chest, suspicion prickling her skin. But slowly the watching turned into helping. She fetched nails, held board steady, laughed, real and sudden, when a plank slipped and smacked Silas across the shin, and he cursed in that gruff, embarrassed way of his. The cabin changed too. Lena May scrubbed the soot-stained windows until light poured, and she gathered wildflowers, simple, stubborn blooms that survived the frost, and set them in a chipped jar on the table. She cooked again, her hands remembering how to knead, how to stir, how to season without thinking. A home. A real one. Not the prison Boone's house had been. Some nights after the baby was asleep, they would sit by the fire, her sewing, him whittling, the crackle of flames filling the space between their heartbeats. They didn't talk about the future. Not yet. Dreaming was still a fragile thing, like ice over a river, beautiful but easily broken. But it was there, waiting. Then came the final test, like it always does when something good dares to take root in poisoned ground. It began with a sound, hooves pounding in the distance, the high bark of angry voices. The baby stirred in her cradle, whimpering. Lena May froze, the needle slipping from her fingers. Silas was already moving, snuffing the lamp, reaching for the rifle propped by the door. Through the window, Lena May saw them. Boone's kin. 3 of them, riding hard, their faces twisted with something ugly and righteous. She knew why they were here, not for justice, for revenge. She felt the old fear rise, bitter and thick in her throat. But this time, something else rose with it. Anger. No more running. No more hiding. This was her home now, her life, and she would not surrender it. Silas caught her gaze across the room. No words passed between them, only a silent promise. Together. He cracked the door open, stepping onto the porch, rifle low but ready. Lena May didn't stay behind. She gathered the baby into her arms and stood tall just inside the doorway, her heart hammering like a war drum. The 3 riders pulled up in, a spray of mud and frost. Amos was in the lead, his face a mask of cruel certainty. Well, well, he drawled. Ain't this cozy? Little bird made herself a nest. Silas said nothing, just stared them down, steady as stone. She don't belong here, Amos spat. She's a stain. Always was. Should have died with her bastard husband. Lena May flinched, not from the words, but from the realization. They would never see her as anything but Boone's property. Boone's failure, unless she showed them. Silas shifted his weight slightly, sensing the charge in the air. But it was Lena May who stepped onto the porch. The baby gurgled sleepily against her shoulder as she faced them. She's not yours to hurt anymore, Lena May said, her voice low but steady. Amos laughed, a rough, ugly sound. You think that piece of driftwood's gonna save you? He spat at Silas's boots. Silas didn't move, didn't blink. Lena May did. She lifted her chin, the bruises on her face shining like badges now, not marks of shame. He didn't save me, she said clearly. I saved myself. Silas glanced at her then, the smallest shift. And in that glance she saw pride, respect, something holy. The standoff held for one breathless heartbeat, then another. Finally, Amos sneered, jerked his horse around, and spat into the dirt. Won't last. Trash never does. The 3 riders wheeled away and thundered back toward town, their anger like smoke in the air, thick, choking, but already thinning. Lena May stood there long after the sound of hooves faded. Her legs shook. Her arms ached, but her spine stayed straight. She had fought. She had stood. And she was still standing. Silas came up behind her, his hand light on her shoulder, not pushing, not pulling, just there. She leaned back against him, just for a moment, letting herself believe it, letting herself believe that love wasn't something stolen in secret, or begged for in broken words. It was something you chose, and she chose this, Later that night, as the fire burned low, they sat together at the table. Silas cleared his throat, a rare, uncertain sound. "I could head north, come spring," he said, carefully. "There's work on ranches, good land, fresh start." Lena May studied him, the way the firelight softened the hard lines of his face. She understood what he wasn't saying. He would go if she asked. Stay if she needed. She could have her life, whatever shape she wanted it to take. The baby stirred. In her arms, tiny fingers curling into the fabric of her dress. Lena May thought of the prairie, endless and wild. She thought of nights spent in fear, of bruises that never quite faded, of a town that never knew her name, only her scars. She thought of Silas, of building something with her own hands, of fires that didn't die. Slowly, she reached across the table, took his hand in hers. "We build it here," she said. Silas didn't smile. He just squeezed her hand, as if anchoring them both to the ground. It wouldn't be easy. The town would whisper. Winter would bite. Memories would ache, but the fire had returned, and this time, she would tend it herself. "You've come this far with her. You felt that, didn't you? Subscribe. I want you to meet someone else tomorrow. Someone just as forgotten." Spring came late that year. The snow thawed slow, like the town itself was reluctant to let go of its bitterness. But the river sang again. The buds braved the cold, and Lena May, for the first time in her life, felt the season turning inside her too. She and Silas rebuilt more than the cabin. They rebuilt belief. One fence post, one sleepless night, one hesitant smile at a time. Still, the town watched. Still, the whispers clung like smoke. No one said it outright, but Lena May saw it in their eyes when she came to trade for cloth or salt. Pity, suspicion, contempt worn polite like Sunday best. They thought Silas would tire of her. They thought she would crawl back, tail tucked, or worse, disappear like a ghost not worth mourning. But neither happened. Because of one quiet, defiant morning, the day Silas made his choice, clear as the sunrise. It was market day, the town square, muddy and buzzing with talk. Lena May had come for simple things, a bolt of muslin, a jar of honey if she could spare the coin. She wore a plain dress, her hair tied back, the baby wrapped snug against her back. She kept her head down. That was safer. Or it had been. Silas found her by the blacksmith's stall. No fanfare, no speech, just a rough hand, warm and sure, reaching out. He took her hand in his, the way a man might claim his fortune or swear a vow, firm, unashamed. Conversations around them slowed, stopped. Someone dropped a basket. A horse snorted, restless. Lena May felt the heat of a dozen stares pressing against her skin, but Silas didn't look at them. He only looked at her, and in that gaze was everything he couldn't say aloud. "You are not what they called you. You are not what they tried to break. You are whole. You are wanted. You are free." She had a choice too. In that heartbeat that stretched, long and trembling between them, she could pull away, could slip back into the safe gray spaces where no one expected anything of her, or she could choose to be seen, fully, finally. Lena May curled her fingers tighter around his. She chose. Together, they walked the length of the square, past the storekeepers pretending not to gape, past the preacher's wife clucking her tongue, past old Amos Boone scowling from the saloon steps. They didn't stop, didn't explain, didn't ask permission. Out beyond the last house, where the prairie rolled open like an unwritten page, Silas paused. The spring wind whipped at their clothes, tangling Lena May's hair in wild ribbons. He tugged something from his coat pocket, a simple braided ring of rawhide, softened by long hours of work. No diamonds. No gold, just a promise made from the only thing he had to give, himself. He didn't kneel. He wasn't that kind of man. He just held it out, cradled in his scarred palm. "I can't offer much," he said, voice rough. But I can offer true. Lena. May's throat ached. She pressed the baby close, blinking fast against the sting in her eyes. Out here, no one was watching. No one to judge if she cried or laughed, or simply stood there stunned at the impossible beauty of it all. She reached out, and for the second time that day, chose him. He slipped the ring onto her finger, the leather warm from his hand. No priest. No papers, just the sky vast above them, and the earth steady beneath, a wedding written in wildflower and wind. Later that night, they sat before the fire, the baby drowsing in her cradle. Silas carved a new board for the cabin wall, marking it with 3 names, hers, his, and the baby's, a family stitched together not by blood or blessing but by will. Lena May traced the letters with her fingertips. She thought of Boone's house, heavy with silence and dread. She thought of the night spent believing she was a burden, a mistake, a punishment. And now she sat with a man who saw her not as ruined, but as rare, as something salvaged and sacred. Maybe the scars would never vanish. Maybe the town would never forget. But out here, under this endless stretch of stars, she had a name again, a future, a home. And when the baby stirred, fussing against the night's chill, Lena May lifted her and whispered soft promises into the dark, a lullaby for a life remade, a hope passed down, small and strong. She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe, and let me introduce you to the next miracle tomorrow.